Welcome to the Garage, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter's here, Gary's here, and you're here. Thank you for joining us. Only 28 days of fuel in reserve. That's all we have. 28 days. The international standard minimum is 3 months. That's 90 days. I wonder why this was allowed to happen. Only 20 days worth of avgas, 24 days worth of diesel. And you know, nothing moves. No supermarket shelves don't get restocked. Nothing happens in the world without those big trucks and their diesel engines. It is our, as I understand it, our international responsibility to have at least 90 days in reserve. We signed a treaty to that effect. So why don't we? Somebody should explain that. You know how supply chains can come apart. I know we do have some reserves in the United States, but that's a long way away. You know, the Straits of Hormuz or the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, anything can happen. It doesn't have to be a war. It can be all kinds of things. You have to think ahead. The Voice, which of course was defeated at the national referendum, and you would know by now that it's been snuck through the back door here in South Australia by the Labor government, giving Aboriginal people significant say over things that affect them. And that really does mean any legislation, because any legislation affects everybody regardless of the colour of his or her skin. Houston, we have a problem. I don't think Houston knows about this yet. The Aboriginals do not want the redevelopment of the North Adelaide Golf Course because it was originally a burial ground for Aboriginal people. This is something that is likely to turn around and bite Peter Malinauskas on the bum, because he wants the Aboriginal voice, but he also wants the high-profile Live Golf tournament next year. Seems like you can't have them both. Be fascinating to see. I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room in that argument. This silly federal government, the federal government, has allowed the company responsible for many of China's Belt and Road operations worldwide to take charge of several net zero projects here in Australia. Really? Now, if that isn't a red line, I don't know what is. Let's look closely at this. China has a clear and simple view of net zero. It doesn't exist and won't exist, certainly in China. They would not let such a thing get in the way of their national prosperity. You can rest assured. Yet they have people here in Australia trying to lock us into this nonsense. It does not pass the pub test in any shape or form. Now here's another real shocker. The Auditor General's report, tabled in Parliament on Tuesday last, has found that the South Australian Hydrogen Office, I'll bet you didn't even know we had one of those, the South Australian Hydrogen Office, which was dissolved in May, has spent over $285 million. That is in just 3 years, for absolutely nothing. Labor was gambling and lost, but they were using our money. It was a hydrogen fantasy. But as I say, it wasn't their money, so I guess didn't worry them too much. It should worry us. They say they now plan on trying to sell the generators that they purchased for this now defunct hydrogen plant or project, for which they had originally allocated the princely sum of more than $500 million, $593 million to build. That was back in May 2022. And that was to deliver on a pre-election hydrogen promise, pie in the sky for Whyalla. But in 2025, the whole thing was cancelled. The whole green left-wing obsession is a joke. But because they're in office, they can just go on fixing a problem that doesn't exist. Australia's contribution to global emissions, as I've often said, is 1%. That is not worth turning our world upside down, throwing our economy under the bus to fix. And in any case, we can't fix it. In fact, what we do here in Australia does not matter one iota. Doesn't matter at all. And if you think it does, ring me tomorrow on 0491 65 68 60, or you can message me. We had, speaking of the show tomorrow, last Friday, we had the EV Council. That's Electric Vehicle Council. I bet you didn't know we had one of those either. Well, we had them on live streaming, the live streaming show last Friday. They want the government to ban the sale of new diesel and petrol powered vehicles from 2035. That's only 10 years. That's gone in a blink. High-handed, insensitive and wrong. What this left-wing government couldn't achieve with incentives and bonuses and handouts, it is now going to try and achieve through compulsion. To achieve nothing. Now the question is, are you going to sit there and just let them do this? Net zero does not mean zero choice when it comes to the car you might want to buy for yourself, for your family. Your choice, your freedom. You're free to decide, unless of course you surrender to these idiots, of course, which I don't think you will do. If these EVs were such a great idea, you would not have to compel people to buy them. You would not have to bribe people to buy them. That's the true scene. This was interesting, I thought. Pets on aeroplanes. Pets on aeroplanes. Pete, would you have Katie on the plane with you?
Yes, but she's too big.
Oh, she'd have the seat.
No, they've got to fit into a cage.
Oh.
Yeah, they have to. It's only small dogs, cats. Yeah. But I would, yes.
Yeah, well, I think it's... Look, pets are part of the family. 0491 65 68 60. Pets are part of the family. I think Virgin, who are behind this, I think Virgin is pretty smart doing it. But talking about airlines, Julia Morris, she's an Australian comedian. I don't know. I've never thought of her as being particularly funny, but she's been around a long time. She's gone public with a demand. I don't know what the backstory is here, what happened, but she's gone public with a demand that airlines should have women-only seating. What do you think of that? A section of the aeroplane where only women could travel. Now, it sounds to me like something out of the 1900s.
It would have to be near the toilets.
Oh, well, first class. First class. But don't forget, it has been done before. Air India have had a gender preference seating arrangement for ages. Now, admittedly, women would just have to pay a little more to sit, make sure, how do I put this? Make sure that a man didn't end up sitting beside you. Gee, I mean, he could be an interesting man. I don't know why people think like this. Anyway, I'm not a woman. I guess that's the thing.
Could be Jeremy Cordeaux.
Could be anybody. I mean, it's a lottery. Life is a lottery. In India, though, I've never been to India. I've never... I suppose I'm sort of fascinated by India, where you can have so much wealth living right alongside so much poverty, and yet still there is harmony. I think it's fascinating. They have, in India, women-only train carriages. I never knew that till I started looking at this story. I don't know what that says about India, but it's obviously an interesting place. But what sort of a precedent does all of this set? What about discrimination? If you can segregate on the basis of gender, what's next? Somebody objects to sitting beside a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. Somebody says, no, I don't want to sit beside somebody of a different race or somebody who's too big. You know, I mean, can you say that you don't want to sit beside someone for reasons, and I'll put that alongside gender, for any reason? I think it's a very slippery slope, but you may like to talk to me about it tomorrow. Happy birthday to op shops everywhere. Funded and founded by Lady Millie Tallis, a Melbourne socialite who was the global founder. Yep, it was started in Melbourne, but soon spread right throughout the world. There are a few articles about this Australian philanthropist, but if you dig around into her past, she's described as a former showgirl who married well. A lot of them did.
Just going to say that.
Many do. Many do. It was back in 1925, which is 100 years ago, when Lady Tallis had an idea that would go on to have far more impact than just one little old shop in Melbourne. So we celebrate World Op Shop Day. Sure, before then there were thrift shops and goodwill stores which sold second-hand goods cheaply, but they were considered to be of very poor quality and only for very poor people, definitely not fashionable. What Lady Tallis did was to change all of that. She called it an opportunity shop, which soon became an op shop.
Beanie's Boutique.
Yes. Happy World Op Shop Day, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful. I don't know how much time I've got, but the Victorian Education Department has announced its new approach to education. Some would say about time. A new initiative to fix the education crisis. Well, once they've got a few crises in Victoria. Crime, a crime plague or thing is going on there. I suppose you'd call it a crime wave. People are leaving the state because they do not feel safe. A terrible indictment of a whole lot of things, mostly government policy, I would say. What the schools are going to do with the education crisis is to cut screen time. That's in the classroom. I don't know if the parents are going to do the same thing at home. But in the classroom they're going to go back to pen and paper. A very rare moment of enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. It's horrifying that things have to get as bad as this before action, the obvious action, was taken. Parents will no longer have to shell out $1,500 for a laptop. For years it's been obvious that there was something terribly wrong, fundamentally wrong with education. The modern classroom approach, I mean, staring them in the face. Why are we forever throwing the baby out with the bathwater? I'm sure the kids will keep their screens. They just have to keep some perspective along with it. We're here for the Rising Sun, ladies and gentlemen. They're our wonderful sponsors at 60 Bridge Street at Kensington, 8333-0721. Grant and Jackie, your host and hostess. They will take good care of you at the Rising Sun, regularly chosen as the best pub or inn in South Australia. Built back in 1845 with lots of atmosphere, fine cuisine, beautiful wine list, and they've even got art on the wall. And speaking of art, Elders Fine Art Gallery in Melbourne Street, North Adelaide is another sponsor. 106 and 110. Two beautiful buildings. Jim Elder and Helen will be having they have 3 or 4 sales auctions a year, and they'll fit one more in before Christmas. 8267-2869. If you have a painting that you'd like Jim to have a look at, give you an appraisal, you can decide whether you'd like to include it in his global auction. And that's the best way to sell, because you're selling to the world. That's the way to get the best price. Call us tomorrow if you'd like to, 0491 65 68 60. JeremyCordeaux.com. You can get the app, which is Simple Radio, and that's on your telephone, which means I'll be in the palm of your hand, which is where I kind of like to be. You know what I mean? Happy birthday if you're having a birthday. Happy wedding anniversary. It's the 23rd. What can I tell you? US patent is issued to an American inventor, Sebastian Hinton, for a playground climbing structure popularly known as monkey bars. If ever you wondered who invented monkey bars, Sebastian Hinton, this day in 1923, hanging from monkey bars. Speaking of classrooms going back to basics, pen and ink and paper, 2001 was the year Apple released the iPod. Was that the beginning of this whole revolution, the iPod? Around about then. 1942, during World War II, Britain launches major offensive at El Alamein, Egypt. 1954, Britain, France and the US agree to end the occupation of Germany. Walt Disney, the animated film Dumbo is released in 1941. Michael Crichton, American novelist, The Andromeda Strain, Congo. Screenwriter, God, he's done a lot of things. Jurassic Park, he wrote all the ER episodes on television. Film producer, Twister. Born Chicago, Illinois, died 2008, born this day in 42. One of the first modern plastic surgeries in the West, performed by Joseph Carpue on a soldier's nose in England using Indian techniques. That's not so surprising, but the year is 1814. I thought plastic surgery was really born out of the First World War. But we're going to get a plastic surgeon on the show one day on a Friday morning. Tell us what we can modify and how we can enlarge and reduce and do all of that. Shortcuts, ladies and gentlemen, shortcuts. 42 BC, Marcus Julius Brutus, Roman senator and the most famous of the assassins of Julius Caesar, commits suicide on this day in 42 BC, but born 85 BC. 1942, all 12 passengers and crewmen aboard an American Airlines DC-3 airliner killed when it was struck by a US Army Air Force bomber near Palm Springs, California. Amongst the victims is composer Ralph Ranger, who wrote the Bob Hope theme. You know that theme called Thanks for the Memory? Very famous. 1942, you never know when your number is up. freak accident. Ryan Reynolds, Canadian-American actor. The Green Lantern, Deadpool, born Vancouver, British Columbia, 1976. Al Jolson, American-Lithuanian jazz singer, silent film actor. Mammy and Swanee dies at 64. And one more, that was 1950, and one more, 1973 on this day, Richard Nixon agrees to turn over the White House tapes to Judge John Sirica. Seems like just yesterday to me. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to your company tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. We'll be back next Tuesday with another posting at 9 o'clock and next Thursday at 9 o'clock posting. But do join us tomorrow. 3 hours of interesting stuff. Believe in yourself. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Goodbye for now.